welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy, and we believe in empowering people through storytelling and education. Today we have on Irene Fehr, and she is a sex therapist, and we have a really great conversation. I love chatting with her, and she gives some really good tips and insights, and we just talk, all about sex. So this might not be one for the littles. There is some, not graphic, but, kind of lingo used about a few different things, some questions that I ask her, and we just really dive into it. There is a couple times on the episode where the audio is like a little spotty. So just giving you a little heads up. It's good though. It's a great interview, and she gives us good things to think about, to take into our relationships, suggests some books and videos and things like that as well. Before we dive in, if you didn't listen to last week's, it was awesome. Caitlin was on, and she just shared her story about her birth, and she's a doula, and just kind of her story, which was awesome. She, I think being a doula, there's just kind of certain things that people expect, maybe how your birth would go and things like that. And she just, I love her story and how she just kind of shared everything, and also just holding space for everyone to kind of have their own story and their own birth, and to process what needs to be processed, and to be validated in maybe what happened, and to heal from things, or even just to, if you are that person that looks back and you're like, yeah, my birth went awesome, like exactly how I planned, like that's awesome, good for you. And that does happen, too. So, but it was a really good conversation, and I just loved connecting with her and chatting with her. So make sure that you go back and listen to that episode. All right, guys, I'm 36 weeks. I'm 37 weeks. Oh my gosh, I can't even keep track anymore. And I'm at the point in my pregnancy where I don't remember it being like this with Jovi, like maybe the last week, but there are days that I can barely walk. Like I am in so much pain. My lower back, my front, hips and pelvis area. And I'm going to the chiropractor every week. I'm doing pelvic floor therapy. Like even right now while I'm recording this, I'm bouncing on a ball. And I'm just like, I don't want to feel like this for another month. This is going to suck if this is what it's like for another month. And I hate that. I hate that because with Jovi, I was so patient, and I don't want to feel impatient. Like it's just dragging out. Like I want the baby to come when they come. And, but this just sucks, limping around every single day. So if you're somebody who experienced a lot of discomfort in pregnancy, you are not alone. I'm there with you. Sometimes at the end of the day, I can barely even walk. So it's not fun. I'm hoping it gets better. I'm still trying a few things, and, stretching, massage actually does help. I should book a massage. Vito will rub my back, and it helps a lot. So it's, getting toward the end, and, I'm not ready for baby to come just because we have some stuff around the house to do still. But once that stuff is done, baby can come anytime. And I know some of you are with me in that. Before we dive in, make sure that you leave us a review. Reach out to me. Tell me what episodes you want to have, what topics. If there's any experts or anything like that, reach out to me and let me know. All right, let's dive right in. All right, everyone, I'm excited about today's podcast. We're going to talk about sex. I have Irene Fehr here, and if you're listening to this podcast, you're either trying to conceive, or you're a mom, or want to be a mom, or you have kids that are older, which means that you are either having sex trying to get pregnant, or you've had sex because you have kids. And it's something that affects all of our lives. And we know that the seasons also change as we introduce children, expand our family. things with the pandemic has changed people's sex lives, so many different things. So I'm super excited to dive into it with Irene here. She's a sex and intimacy coach. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'd love for you to share with us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing what you do.
Well, thank you. So I'm a sex and intimacy coach, and I want to emphasize the importance of both. Sex is, of course, about sex, the physical aspect of it, and intimacy is about the emotional aspect of it. And this is the kind of sex that I really am passionate about, that I teach. It's sex that has the emotional component around connection, feeling safe with your partner, feeling like you're cared about and cared for. And how I got into this work is that my own experiences with sex in my marriage did not fall into both of these categories. But my story is very typical of so many people, so many of my clients today. And it was, I met a man, and we fell in love. Everything was really perfect and passionate in the beginning. We clicked, and sex and sexual desire was plenty in the beginning. But then as the relationship deepened, I started to notice my libido wane and at some point go away completely. I also experienced painful sex, not being able to lubricate, and then again, eventually not wanting sex at all. And the intimacy piece, or the emotional intimacy, was really missing in our relationship, and then certainly in our sex life. And I didn't know that that's what I was craving at the time. But looking back, I know that piece was hugely missing. And it actually led to the demise of the relationship because we couldn't talk about it. We couldn't talk about what was happening. We couldn't address the issue. And I took it on as my fault, my responsibility. And again, we never talked about it, so there was no opportunity to change that perspective. And this experience, of course, led to divorce, and then led me to shut down for many years. I just took it on as there's something wrong with me as a woman. I am sexually broken. I must not be just sexual enough. I even looked into what it means to be asexual because I had really assumed that was me. But that experience led me on a path of also then personal growth after a couple of years of being really shut down and working with sex coaches, learning about my own body through a lot of experimentation, then starting to really dig into the experience of other women and the knowledge and the research. And very quickly into that, I realized I meant to do this work. Like, there are so many women who are like myself in longer term relationships that I was, but just generally in a long-term relationship, so many women who are mothers who have very similar experiences. And I want to help, and I want to not only help to troubleshoot the situation, but to empower women to connect to our sexuality and to the pleasure inside of us. Because what I experienced during those years was just so life-changing and opening and transformative that, again, I wanted other women to have it. So I became a sex and intimacy coach, specializing in women's libido in a long-term relationship. And I now work primarily with couples who are having similar patterns in their relationship and they both want to see change in their lives and then in their relationship, of course.
Mm-hmm. That's so amazing. All right. Do you feel like you are generally pretty healthy, but you still deal with some bloating or digestive issues, or just don't know why that you aren't feeling your best lately? Bloom can help you feel great year round without the stomach issues. Bloom Nutrition makes it easy and delicious to give your body what it needs to feel your best inside and out. They're greens and superfood, which is amazing. It helps fight bloating, helps digestion, increases natural energy, and keeps your skin glowing. It has over 50 nutrients, including whole fruits and vegetables, fiber, probiotics, antioxidants, and more. And it actually tastes delicious. Like, have you tried like a green powder before? And it tastes like you just mowed your lawn and then ate it. It doesn't taste like that. It comes in really good flavors. You can choose from coconut, mixed berry, citrus, and original. Bloom is made for you, whether you're trying to recover from a big meal or a night out or just feel your best. They have over 350,000 people that trust Bloom and feel better every single day. And right now, Bloom Nutrition is offering the listeners 15% off your purchase of their greens and superfoods blend when you go to bloomnu.com/mamas. That's BLOOMNU.com/mamas for 15% off your purchase. Go to bloomnu.com/mamas for 15% off. I feel like you brought up so many points that I want to talk about. I definitely want to touch on the libido, because that's something that gets changed through the different seasons. When you're pregnant, when you have a kid, there's different things that affect it, your hormones. And then you brought up the emotional piece, the intimacy. Like, I feel like that has to do if you're not feeling comfortable, if you're not feeling open, those things affect it as well. And I also want to talk about the dryness, because that's something that I've had to try to explain to my husband. He'll be like, are you like not into it? I'm like, no, I am. I can't control the dryness of my vagina right now. Like between being postpartum and then pregnant again, and your hormones change as you get older. And I feel like that's something that a lot of men don't realize, is like that libido when you first met, right? That passion, it affects things differently. And now we've been married for a few years, and it's harder to get wet. I'm just going to say it. So and I feel like that's something that men don't really understand. So then they think like, oh, you're not into it, you don't want me or whatever. It's like, that has really nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. I love that you're bringing this up, and I could talk about this for hours. Try to summarize this. Yes, men don't get this because men's bodies don't function the same way as women's. So men have what's called spontaneous sexual desire. So they have an image in their heads of their partner, or maybe their partner comes and brushes up against them. And literally within a couple of seconds, maybe a minute, maybe two, they can be erect and hard and fully ready for intercourse. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else that needs to happen. So literally this whole process is very spontaneous and takes a couple of minutes. But women's sexual desire is what's called responsive, and it's responding to a big number of, or a large number of factors. Part of it is, for most women in a long-term relationship, they're managing career, home life, children's lives, being with their partners, taking care of everything and everyone. So there's exhaustion and just the sheer amount of energy she has at the end of the day. If she's exhausted and she doesn't have a lot of energy, it's going to take her longer to get into sex, to access her sexual desire and to build arousal. Mm-hmm. So the dryness piece, of course, comes into that. It's going to take longer, and it's going to take a different set of things to get her first into her body and focusing on herself than it did when you were dating, when all you were doing was talking to each other, going to the movies and spending weekends and again, that's a very different story than the picture of everyday life that I painted moments ago. So, and we have very different models of our bodies. Men's models work very differently. They have access to arousal instantaneously. And women, we need, again, a lot of factors. 5 minutes, and a woman needs 40. And he looks at her thinking, oh, she's broken. She doesn't want me. And she looks thinking, wow, I'm broken. There must be something wrong with me. Look at him. Mm-hmm. And this is not only wrong, but it's also very destructive and dangerous because it causes disconnect and it causes a lot of pain in blaming ourselves and, of course, blaming each other.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I guess you kind of always hear, at least I did, like growing up, that sex for men is just very physical. For women, it's emotional. And I agree, but I also feel like it can be both for both as well. And yeah, I mean, it definitely was different. Like, I mean, when we first got married and like we didn't have a care in the world, right? Now it's like kids, house projects, bills, pandemic, everything. And so I feel like those things, even if you're thinking, okay, maybe it doesn't affect my sex life, like we're having about the same amount of sex, but it does. Like you do kind of have to mentally, like for me, it's like, okay, I need to stop making a Costco list in my mind and try to be in the moment.
Right. Yeah. And then the difference between how it used to be in the beginning where you were on each other's minds and then now there's so many other things competing for that attention. And you need to first ground yourself, come into your body, feel relaxed to even access any kind of desire for your partner, much less sex, and then connecting to the sex piece. But what I saw in myself and what I see in so many women is we want to rush it. We're tired, right? We want to rush this process. This process takes on a good day for women because we're like ovens. We need to warm up. We're not like a microwave where you punch the time. But when you are, again, busy, when you have a lot of responsibilities, when you're a mom managing the lives of little ones, when you're a mom managing the lives of little ones, you need more time to get grounded, to connect with the body, start to respond to stimulation, not necessarily sexual stimulation, but just being caressed, being kissed, being touched, then open up more sexually.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've realized too is that I have to I've had some hip and back pain since being pregnant, and my husband, he'll like massage it for me, but it always turns into something, and I had to ask him, I'm like, just can you massage me once non-sexually? Like, can you just give me a massage and that's it? and there's no expectations at the end. I can just go to bed. And he was like, sure. But it's like for men, I just feel like the physical touch gets them going. And for me, I'm like relaxing and ready to go to sleep.
And this is one of the things that I teach in depth in my online program for women. And it's the cycle of arousal and how first we as women need non-sexual touch. And it has to be no strings attached. Like if I say I don't want any more, my partner will go away just as happy as if I said I want more. And that allows us to relax and build up that arousal in our bodies that has us say, oh, actually, don't go too far. I want some more, or I want more. And then maybe I want more tonight. But it really starts with no strings attached touch that allows us to get grounded and relaxed. And then that allows the arousal to build that, again, creates this responsive thread at the end of which we're like, oh, now I want something. And it's very different from the way men work, which means that we have to educate our partners. And we need third parties like myself who educate both people so that it's not, one person teaching the other, but that both people in the couple take responsibility for learning how things are.
Mm-hmm. We are still in the new year. I feel like February is still very new to this year. And that means that it's time to leave behind the things that do not serve you, like overdraft fees. And when your checking account balance is running low, the last thing you need is an overdraft fee. But with Chime, an award-winning app and debit card, You can save that hard-earned paper without paying these overdraft fees. Eligible members can overdraft up to $200 on debit card purchases and cash withdrawals with absolutely no overdraft fees. You can make your first good decision in 2022 and join over 10 million people who are using Chime. Sign up takes only 2 minutes and does not affect your credit score. Get started at chime.com/mamas. That's chime.com/mamas. Banking services provided by and debit card issued by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank N.A. members FDIC eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Overdraft only applies to debit card purchase and cash withdrawals. Limit starts at $20 and may increase up to $200 by Chime. See chime.com/spotme. I'd love to talk about kind of that postpartum season. Because it seems like, I guess probably because that's the season of life I'm in and my friends are in, and it's like, oh, well, when you have kids, you know, I know a lot of people who had a baby and they didn't have a sex drive for a year or however long, or, you know, they're like, oh, you just don't have time for sex anymore, I guess. Or they're being told, like, if you don't have a sex drive for a year, well, you just need to do it for your husband. Like what's going on there? Like, is it just like the hormonal thing, or is it something deeper? Like, how do we connect with our partners? Or I think a big piece of it, which, correct me if I'm wrong, could be wrong, is too, like, voicing your opinions or what you need. Say, my husband knows very well that if, like, I go to put the baby down and he cleans up dinner and does everything and I come back downstairs, there's a much higher chance that we're having sex than if I have to put the baby down, come down, finish the dishes, finish cleaning up the house, and then I'm tired. So he knows, like, and that's a conversation that we had to have is, hey, if you want me to be in the mood, like, to have that space and time, these things need to happen. But a lot of people have a trouble asking what they want or need. And sometimes that changes even physically because your body's changed. So I guess, like, in those first postpartum years, new kids, like, is there a, like, I don't know, I feel like there's 12 questions wrapped into one. What's going on with the libido? How do you keep your sex life alive? And ask for what you want.
Yeah, all super important questions. And there's almost like 12 answers to all of that. So what happens to libido? Well, before even I address that, I want to say how much of an identity change it is becoming a mother, especially for the first time. And what happens on the emotional and psychological level, you're now responsible for a new being who is completely helpless without you. Right. And of course, there's emotional, the love and connection and the bonding that's happening. So you're no longer the same person who you were before you had the baby. So most people don't take time to truly take that in and let that sink in, because the responsibilities of having a baby are so huge and so urgent, right? You bring the baby home, it's crying, you need to attend to its needs. Who has time to sync up or sink in, let all this sink in? So this stage gets bypassed, but it's a really important stage, and it's an important stage to sexuality, because you as a woman have changed, and you as a sexual being have also changed. Your body is no longer just for your pleasure or your partner's. It's also a vehicle for nourishment for your baby. So all of these factors have huge impact on who you are and how you feel, and again, how you relate to yourself and your own body. And that really needs to be taken into account and be done consciously by talking about it, by sharing your fears and concerns about it to your partner or to other people in your close circle, and getting support around that. Just, again, letting it all sink in. So that's number one. Number two, when it comes to libido, so libido can be thought of as those sexual urges. Like, it could be sexual urges that come up during that time of the month when your hormones line up. So usually during ovulation, or it's kind of the desire to have a release, a sexual release. So that's libido at a very basic physiological level. But there's more to libido than that. There is also the connection component. There's the connection to pleasure and to receiving pleasure in your body. There's a component of allowing your body to play, to move, to be free in its expression. So the physiological libido usually drops for women after childbirth because of the many changes in the body, because of the dynamic of what the body, whose body it is and what role it has changes. That's when this other aspect of libido has to come into play, because you're not going to have a lot of these physical urges anymore, but you can cultivate them in response to the pleasurable context that you add into your routine or into your life. So it's for some women it's more touch. For other women it's less touch because they may feel overtouched by the baby or several babies. But it's understanding what your body needs and knowing how to give it the kind of pleasure that it wants in this new stage or a new season, as you called it. There's also the emotional connection. So a partner that helps you at home, of course, you're more likely to be available for sex if that portion of it, of your responsibility is taken care of. Emotional connection, a partner that understands your struggles, your fears, listens to you, is curious about your experiences. When that connection is formed, you're more likely to want to be with them sexually rather than push them away or feel like you're pushed away by them because you're not connected. So this element has to come into play and has to be consciously added, because again, with the amount of urgent responsibilities in your life, you're not just going to at the end of the day have so much energy to connect emotionally. You have to prioritize it. And the last piece is exactly also what you touched upon around dishes and chores. You need an infrastructure that supports you and your partner to stay the lovers that you used to be. And this is especially true for women. Again, a man can get aroused and turned on within seconds. Women need more time. We need more of positive context that support us, that have us feel relaxed. And so really, to have a healthy sex life after you've had children, you have to have an infrastructure of support from your partner, from other people in your family, in the community, so that you have that time, literally the time to just be with each other as lovers, as adults, not as parents and people who are responsible for other things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely hard to find that time. Not like necessarily time for sex. Somehow we always find that, but to like actually just connect like as a couple. And I think the pandemic made it definitely hard to find a date night. We went like 7 months without a date and we're like, we should go on a date night, like just us two. And we're trying to plan something before this next baby comes, but it can definitely be hard to find. I mean, it does take trusting outside resources, whether you have family to watch the kids, or if you don't, then finding a sitter, and that could be stressful.
Which was especially hard during, and still is during, the pandemic. You don't want to invite a stranger in your home because of COVID, but yeah, super important.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to talk about how maybe you've seen the pandemic change people's sex lives, whether it's like for the better or worse. Because I heard divorce rates went up, but I'm not sure.
Yes, I think divorce rates went up. That is definitely a fact. And at the same time, there are couples who realize that they no longer have excuses as to why they're not working on their relationship. So people were stuck at home, especially very much in the beginning. And they realized, okay, yeah, before there was work travel, there was this and that. Now we don't have these excuses. What we do have is we cannot stay in the same house for 24 hours without fighting or without connecting, or that our sex was a problem before, but again, there were reasons why we weren't dealing with it. We cannot deal with it now because, no pun intended, but sex is a lubricant in a relationship. Mm-hmm. And so without that, people were realizing we have to either split up or deal with it. And thankfully, many people decided to deal with it. And so there was a huge uptick in how many people reached out and how many people came to work with me back in April of 2020 because of this. But then again, certainly there were couples who had to choose splitting up because they realized maybe they were at a point of no return and they couldn't really salvage the relationship. Or they realized, wow, this is not a partner that I ever want to be with for 24/7. Why am I even here? Mm-hmm. So a lot of things are true.
Mm-hmm. I feel like just kind of going back to that season of motherhood, how do you get to the place of maybe expressing the things that you need from your partner for people who are having trouble doing that, or getting your partner to maybe come work with somebody like you? I feel like it's probably really hard for men to go see a sex therapist, or a sex coach. They're probably like, no, everything works just fine. I don't need that. Or they feel like somehow they're not satisfying their partner or whatever it is, which can be very, demasculinizing. So, how would you suggest for people listening if they're like, man, I haven't wanted to have sex with my partner. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to ask him. Like, he works hard too, so I don't want to ask him to do the dishes at the end of the day so that I'm in the mood. Or how do I get him on board to work with someone?
Yeah. So in a way, you just said exactly the things you wanted your partner. And the key is to be vulnerable about the situation. Like, hey, I haven't been getting what I need or want in sex, and I don't know how to tell you. I'm at a loss for words. I don't want to tell you to do more dishes because I know you're tired at the end of the day. And I need us to find a way to fix this. And I'd like to get support from a professional around this. And again, vulnerability is key. You want to let your partner in on what's happening inside of you, like the struggle that you're going through, like the emotional turmoil. And of course, also letting him know that you recognize that he is putting a lot of effort and that you are scared that maybe this is going to mean something to him. So you put all of this out on the table, and you also make a request, like, I would like us to see someone. I would like to partner with you for us to see someone together, and make it more about the key to the solution rather than part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Men hate it when women complain about the problem. We like to do that. It actually makes us feel good, and it's something that works in communication between women. But when communicating with men, they get so annoyed and irritated and powerless when we focus on the problem and on the complaining. But here you are naming the problem from a feelings perspective, right? Creating emotional intimacy, and you're making a request. You're showing this is the key to the solution, and I'd like your support, or I'd like your help in doing this. And those two words are very critical: support and help. Getting him on board rather than, again, focusing on the problem and having him feel helpless and not knowing how to change things.
Mm-hmm. How important would you say that sex and intimacy is in a relationship? Because I feel like we all know people who just don't have sex anymore. And they're like, well, this is just how it is. And I'm like, do you have a good relationship then? Like, is that, I don't know, like, is that a thing?
So it really depends on what is it that you want and need out of a relationship. So there's certainly people who want a relationship where there's connection, where they feel emotionally connected and safe with each other. And for example, their goal may be raising a family. So in that sense, sex is a means to these other goals that are much more important. So in this kind of dynamic, sex is important, but again, it's not something that's used to connect them together or to make them feel closer to each other. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, there are couples for whom the sex is a way that they connect to each other, a way that they share something that is unique to them, that they do not do with anyone else. And without that, there is no point to a relationship. Like if you're not romantic partners with your partner, there's no point in staying with them. And so there's a huge spectrum of what sex can mean for you and for your partner and in a relationship. And the absence of it, it's the same thing. For some couple, the absence of it doesn't mean anything. Once they've had children and they've been launched into the world, they don't need sex anymore. And again, then there's other couples that it doesn't make sense for them to be in a relationship for even a month if there isn't that kind of romantic connection between each other. Mm-hmm. So the answer to your question really depends on where you are in the spectrum and what sex means to you and what sex means to your partner. And of course, most problems arise where for one partner, sex is just a means of having children and it's not something that they need to have or want to have, certainly not on a regular basis. And then you have one partner for whom if there is no sex, there is no romantic relationship. You're not really lovers with each other. And you have very different needs and desires stemming from that. And of course, a lot of conflict if they're really hardened positions on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, in that situation, I guess that's when they hire you. Huh?
That's when they hire me, or honestly, if you have such a huge difference in what sex means to you and you're not interested in learning or taking on a new perspective about sex, there isn't much I can do. It's not a match. Just like if you had a couple where one partner wants a child and the other one doesn't, no amount of therapy or coaching is going to bridge that gap. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, there's certainly couples where this means that it leads to a breakup.
So one thing that you say is that sex naturally dies in a long-term relationship, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
I'd love to know why that's a good thing.
Yes. So to get to why this is a good thing, I'm going to take you through two types of sex that naturally die, and then juxtapose that with the type of sex that is everlasting and sustained, grows over time. And so the first type of sex is what I call friction sex. It's driven by hormones and excitement of being with a new partner. So basically evolution at play. The sex hormones want you to hook with each other. And so there's passion and I can't stop thinking about you. I can't keep my hands off you. Like all those things. Can't wait to rip the clothes off. That kind of energy. And typically sex in the beginning is that. It's just friction. So it can be incredibly passionate. It could be incredibly fun. It could be a wonderful experience all around. But it's a limited experience because in the beginning, you don't know each other. So you're basically bringing everything that you know about sex and yourself from previous relationships. So in a way, you're projecting onto your partner. You don't know them yet, and they're projecting you. There's also this kind of sense of wanting it to be really hot and passionate and not ruin the moment. So what this mentality does is that it keeps people, especially women, from asking what we want. So here we are having passionate sex and the woman wants something different, but it's this thinking, I can't tell him that. I don't want to ruin the moment because that heat is so exciting. But the problem is that when we don't ask for what we want, we don't get what we want, and we don't get what we need, which lessens our enjoyment. And the time we do it, we come into it a little bit resentful. And then the next time, again, if we don't say what we want, we come in a little bit more resentful and a little bit more each time. So this kind of sex, if you're not able to say what you want, it's going to deteriorate naturally. If it's not absolutely perfect every time, which doesn't happen to anyone, again, it's going to naturally deteriorate. But naturally, that horniness, that strong sexual drive starts to wane. And couples start to see this and they start to panic, like, whoa, what's happening? Maybe we shouldn't be together. Maybe this isn't the right match. And they start to get more creative, in quotes. So getting more toys, trying wild positions like hanging off ceilings, trying to recreate the heat. But this is sex that's supposed to die because it's driven, like I said, by these hormones that are there to get you to hook up and make a baby. Of course, whether or not you do that, the baby part, that doesn't matter, how the body is functioning. And sex without the emotional connection, sex without the ability to say what you need, that's going to be empty sex. That's going to be sex devoid of emotional intimacy. And that too has little chance of surviving. So friction sex naturally kind of comes to a halt and dies. But if a couple also along the way starts to fall in love, they enter another phase. They kind of bypass the dying stage and they go right into the next stage, which is what I call validation sex. And this is a stage when you're falling in love and you feel really connected and caring about each other. And sex starts to create a sense of safety, like our relationship is safe. We're safe. Look, you want me and I want you and we love each other and sex is the way we were consummating that love. Like it feels really good. It validates the relationship. It validates you as a person. Like, wow, I must be a really attractive woman, or for a man, I must be an attractive man. And it's all beautiful. And validation sex can be incredibly powerful and passionate and connected. It can feel like a warm blanket around you because, again, you feel loved and you feel connected. But what also happens is once you introduce love into the relationship, you also introduce fear of losing that love. We also bend ourselves into pretzels to keep that love. Or that's true for some people, or for others, they get freaked out by too much love and they pull away. So in this stage, all sorts of things start to happen. We start to use sex to validate ourselves and the relationship, which means that we actually remove the erotic element of sex and make it a way to create safety in the relationship. And where there's safety, there's no eroticism. If you're taking care of each other in sex, either by focusing on the other person solely or by not asking for what you need, being like, oh, I can't ask him that. I don't want to inconvenience him, or I don't want him to be unhappy with me. You're going to have miserable sex, or you're going to have sex, or you're not going to have any sex at all because you're just going to be cuddling. You're going to be taking care of each other. Erotic sex requires selfishness. And when there's that fear of losing the love, you cannot risk being selfish. Mm-hmm. So validation sex actually dies out naturally because of these patterns. We kill it. We kill the eroticism by taking care of each other, but like over taking care of each other, and by holding back our voice and our needs and what we want. And, you know, the traditional advice for couples in this stage is go have date night. You just need to reconnect. But the problem is that it's in the dynamic, and it requires some deeper understanding of how you're using sex for validation to be able to let go of that. So no amount of date nights is going to undo this pattern if you're like in this kind of cuddling stage. And especially if you are arguing about this, so having that, you know, monthly, hey, it's been a while conversation, why aren't things happening? You're going to need help untangling this, because again, the love and fear piece, they're just too strong here. So again, this type of sex naturally deteriorates. So couples will find themselves either having no sex or having friction sex just to get it over with. Okay, we have a half an hour, let's just go do it. It lubricates the relationship, so to speak. It makes my partner happy. I'll get an orgasm in the meantime anyways. So it can't be that bad. So you're resorting to the friction, to the physical aspect, but there's no connection. There's no emotional, there's no emotional enrichment from it or nourishment. It's just to kind of, it's what I call checkbox sex, just to check the box. So, okay, so now we've reached the end of these two types of sex. And why it's a good thing is because all of these patterns are using sex for something else. And that's not true eroticism. So they're not meant to survive for a long time. And when couples find themselves here, of course, they find themselves confused, and they start to blame themselves, like, oh, it's my fault. Oh, I'm not good enough as a partner, as a lover. I'm not sexual enough. Or they blame each other, like, you don't care about me. You're not willing to change, or you're not willing to do this for me. And of course, they start to question their love. What's wrong with our relationship? Maybe we're not meant for each other. And the key to understand here is none of those things are true, but that you've naturally reached the end of what sex as you knew it, as you experienced it, can give you. And now this is an opportunity to truly get to know each other and get to know yourselves, and to learn to connect erotically. Like I mentioned earlier, eroticism comes from a selfish desire to enjoy yourself by using your partner's body. Like, I want to be with your body because it gives me pleasure. Mm-hmm. And so establishing that takes a lot of shedding of the old beliefs, of the old layers, of the old ways of doing things, and becoming truly secure in yourself. You don't need sex to validate your prowess or your sexiness. It's those things need to be done in other ways. You need to learn to validate yourself, but then you leave sex to be about sex, about passion, and about eroticism, and about physical connection and emotional connection and all of that. And so at this stage, couples can take that chance to really discover themselves. And of course, they need help doing that, because this is a whole new territory. You can't use the same tools that got you in the predicament to get out of it. But it's a very powerful stage. It's a very exciting stage. And this is exactly what I do with clients, is I help them create what I call connection sex. Again, it's also called erotic sex. But that but that's sustainable and that lasts over time. And that also, incidentally, works for women's bodies, because it's about slowing down, getting to know each other, attuning to each other, which is basically syncing up to each other, having your emotional needs met as much as the physical needs. and being truly in a space with your partner where you feel safe and connected and present. Those work miracles on women's libido, women's enjoyment of pleasure, and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that's very interesting. I feel like I've never heard the steps of sex kind of described, which really does make sense. And there is like a reason for that initial, like you said, the hormones were made to procreate. So your body's like, do it.
You'll line everything up to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know. So yeah, that's super interesting. Do you have any advice for like, so I'm about to have my second baby and I'm just like nervous. Like, how am I going to balance? Because I remember when I had my daughter, I'm like, I was excited, to have a baby, but also I kind of grieved just having my husband and I. I'm like, I used to be like, he was my world, I could shower him with all my love and attention and time. And now I'm like, what? So now having two, I'm like, how am I going to balance that? Like, how do you do that? Do you have any advice for that stage of life?
Well, you may not be able to figure out how you're going to do that until you have your baby. But it's really important to talk about it ahead of time and to focus your conversations on both the practical. So again, I use that word infrastructure to talk about, okay, now we're going to have a second child. What kind of infrastructure do we need to support us and to support you as well as a mom of now two babies? And, in addition to that, also talk about the emotional piece, like the fears of maybe having even less time with your partner, or the fears about what kind of changes a second baby will introduce. And so, again, you may not find the appropriate solutions right away or until you have the baby, but that you're putting these out on the table, which means that you're not carrying the burden of all of this alone. You're not carrying the fears alone in your own head and in your own body. You are creating partnership around this. And this is really what I want to say about motherhood, that motherhood, although, of course, you're the mother and you're having the baby as a woman, motherhood is a partnership thing. Mm-hmm. And we need our partners we need to let our partners in about what's happening to us, what our worries are, what our fears are at a very vulnerable level, to bring them in and to create partnerships so that what happens when you have first baby, second baby, nth number baby is that you're tackling this together and you feel supported, because ultimately that's the biggest element of many elements, but it's the biggest one when it comes to sexual intimacy. Feeling actually close to your partner, mm-hmm. and wanting to have more connection with them, including, of course, physical intimacy.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have any favorite resources or tools besides your own that you recommend to people when it comes to surrounding sex and intimacy?
I love the work of Sue Johnson. So she's not a sex therapist specifically, but she does talk about sex quite openly. She's Canadian and actually from Britain. So she has a book called Hold Me Tight, and that's a really powerful book that contains, I believe it's 8 conversations that allow you to get very vulnerable with your partner. So not talk about the practical things of what's bothering you, but to connect on an emotional level. And one of those conversations is about sex, which is very powerful. And I highly recommend the book. So it's Sue Johnson by Hold Me Tight. So it's Hold Me Tight by Sue Johnson.
Perfect. I'll definitely link that in the show notes for people as well. If people listening want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
My website is a great resource and a way to connect with me. My website is irenefehr.com. And I particularly want to point your listeners to two resources. One is a video where I talk more about these 3 types of sex. So that can be linked off of the homepage. And also a 3-video series specifically for women on how to want sex again. And in the 3 videos, I talk about 4 very dangerous myths that actually lead to women losing their libido or losing interest in sex, and also the impact on the relationship and how there's this interplay between libido and connection and what happens. So I highly recommend those, as well as, of course, my blog, which has hundreds of articles by now about different topics, including motherhood.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to link that in the show notes as well. Now I'm super curious about those myths. I'm just going to have to watch the video.
Yes, please do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Irene, for coming on and for sharing with us, and for all of your amazing tips and advice. I love chatting with her. I actually like talking about sex. I did grow up in a very conservative environment, but I feel like as I've gotten older, like it's like, yeah, me and my husband are married. Yeah, we have sex. Like, it's like this weird taboo thing that it's like, okay, you're married with children. Like, obviously you have sex. So, it's a normal part of life. And there's just so much weight in that topic, whether it's shame or taboo or maybe it's, just different expectations. But, it's a good conversation to have. Like, for me, I feel like it's good to have an open conversation, and it's usually not something that's ever off topic for me. So it was fun chatting with Irene. Make sure that you are staying tuned. We have some really great episodes coming up. I know I said Dr. Mona was going to be on next week. It might not be until the following. I'm not sure. It might be... Oh, no, wait, it is next week. Okay, cool. I just checked my calendar. So Dr. Mona, peds.talk, is going to be on next week. I'm really excited for you guys to hear the episode. She's just awesome. I love chatting with her. I wish she was here in my pediatrician because she's just so much fun. I feel that way like with so many of the guests that come on. I'm like, man, like, who was it? The guy, Mark, that came on and we talked about just therapy and different things like that. I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish you were my therapist. Like, you just meet these really cool people and they're doing good work, and it's just great. A lot of them have a lot of free resources out there. So whenever they give those out, make sure that you're taking advantage. All right. Love you guys. Happy Valentine's Day. It is the month of love. And I hope you have a good week. All right. Bye.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies, and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.